Hey everyone. Hi, how are you doing? My name is Erin Douglas. I'm a climate reporter with the Boston Globe. Thank you so much for being here today. We are very excited for this panel that we've called Young Green Game Changers. And so I'm going to introduce our two panelists, two local founders. So we have on the far left here, Noah Soren, founder and CEO of Idori, an early childhood education brand that teaches kids about sustainability with storybooks, characters, plush toys, after-school programs, and online games. Noah is a children's book author, entrepreneur, and environmental activist. He grew up on a farm in Montgomery, Vermont, and he went to college at Boston University and graduated in 2024. Welcome, Noah. And then we also have Elliot Bennett. Elliot is the co-founder and chief financial officer of Ecotone Renewables, a tech startup that transforms food waste into sustainable solutions with anaerobic technology. Elliot has helped scale Ecotone's on-site food waste processing and regenerative agriculture business, leading expansion efforts across the Northeast United States. Ecotone is currently on track to surpass $3 million in revenue, and he went to Boston College and graduated in 2021. Thanks, both of you, for being here today. So we are going to get started, but I just wanted to let the audience know that we will have a few minutes for questions at the end. If you're watching online, you can use the Q&A tool on Zoom. And then if you're here with us in the room, you should use the QR code to submit your questions, which you can do at any time during the panel. I'm going to read those questions out loud at the end, and pro tip, it's easier for me to read if they're short questions, like word count short. And so, yeah, let's get started. So both of you have like very unique businesses, and I want each of you to explain them a little bit for us. And let's start with Elliot. You know, your company retrofits shipping containers, I think, for local compost facilities that can be deployed on site for places like universities, commercial facilities, restaurants. And you told me you've got 12 of these in operation right now. So how do they work? Like, tell us what technology is inside these shipping containers.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a tongue twister, but it's anaerobic digestion, and it works ultimately exactly the same way that the human body works, where we're chewing up food. It's going through the esophagus into our stomach. That's where the quote-unquote magic happens. We're obviously getting energy from that, and then a byproduct comes out the other end. That's what our systems do. Instead, it's food waste. We're turning that into renewable biogas, and we're scrubbing for methane, and then we're producing what we call soil sauce, which is an organic liquid plant fertilizer.
Okay, and so if you're at the restaurant, you're throwing the like scraps or whatever into like a bin, and then it like goes in there and it.
Yeah. So it's really, it is just a shipping container. It has a chute on the outside, so you're throwing food waste in the exact same way that you would throw it out in the trash, and our system does the rest. So it's very easy for universities, hospitals, airports to utilize the technology.
And why would your customers want one of these?
There's a couple reasons. The first is that it's on site, it's really easy to use, and it's sustainable. But the second is that it's really expensive for a lot of businesses to get rid of waste. Food waste is the heaviest part of the waste stream. And so what we're able to do is we're able to reduce their operating costs, which for most people that care about the bottom line is a big benefit.
Okay, great. And then Noah, you told me when we were talking before that the Idori brand was in part inspired by the classic Dr. Seuss book, The Lorax. And you told me that the Lorax was missing something. And so what was the Lorax missing? And tell me a little bit about the intent of this character that you came up with.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Erin mentioned, I grew up on an organic vegetable farm in northern Vermont, and I spent a lot of my childhood heavily immersed in nature, and it gave me a deep appreciation for the environment and made me care a lot about sustainability. And when I moved to Boston to go to BU, I realized that the majority of children, unfortunately, don't have these opportunities to engage intimately with nature from a young age and are therefore much less likely to care about sustainability later on. So I started looking into research of how do children develop their values, biases, behaviors, and at what age? And I learned that children start developing those things very, very early on, as early as 3, 4, and 5 years old. Yet on average in the American education system, kids often aren't taught about climate change or sustainability until middle or high school, when in half of our country, the public education system doesn't address these issues at all. So having grown up with one of my favorite authors being Dr. Seuss, and remembering that the Lorax was a children's book that taught me about sustainability and made me care about like the fact that trees were getting cut down in places in other parts of the world, and that seemed like something that was out of my control. And what the Lorax was really missing was it was getting all of these young children to care about sustainability, this idea that our trees are getting chopped down and not getting replaced at a rate that's going to sustain our natural world. But it doesn't do anything with that energy. It doesn't show all of these children who it captivates how they can actually take that energy and that desire to take action to actually go out and be a part of the solution rather than a part of the problem. So I brought a little prop today. So I created this character, which is Benji the Tree Hopper, who is inspired slightly by the Lorax. And Benji the Tree Hopper is meant to help kids develop empathy for our forests by showing kids that our forests are fun and lots of other animals and our favorite fruits come from the forest. And it all starts with helping kids develop gratitude for the natural world. And then in the children's book, we introduce them to this idea that our trees are getting cut down in an age-appropriate way. And then what we do that I don't think the Lorax did very effectively is we provide recommendations or learning roadmaps for young children to provide them with tangible hands-on activities for how they can implement sustainable behaviors in their day-to-day lives, so that we offer a more holistic sustainability education, starting with gratitude, moving on to learning about sustainability issues, and then finishing with taking action.
Great. And I feel like a lot of businesses think about making their companies more sustainable after they've already started their companies. But both of you, started your companies with the intent of, creating a sustainable and climate-focused business model. And so I was curious, how did you ensure that the suppliers that you were finding were sustainable and not greenwashing? And did it cost more to make that choice? And I don't know, either of you can start.
I can go first here. Finding manufacturing was actually an incredibly difficult challenge for me. It was only after I decided that I wanted to use children's literature and toys to teach kids about the beauty and fun of nature that I realized that the publishing and the toy industry are both horrendously unsustainable. And it gave me a really strong desire to not only want to educate children about sustainability, but also to shift the paradigm in these two industries when we think about how we produce things. So I did an insane amount of research. I probably got on calls with around 20 to 30 different manufacturing companies from around the world, and it was only when I came across Bears for Humanity, which I ultimately decided to partner with, that I found someone who I felt really aligned with my mission and my values. And Bears for Humanity is actually a nonprofit. They're based out of India, and they source all of their, they make eco-friendly plush out of organic cotton, and they source all of that cotton from local co-op farms that are below 12 acres. So they're supporting local agriculture. They make sure that all of the farms practice crop rotation and responsible water irrigation. But what really drew me to partnering with this company was the story of the founder. And he was a father, and basically the story that he told me was when he first had his child, he went into a toy store and he just wanted to take out a toy, something that he could feel good about giving to his kid, and he walked out of that toy store empty-handed because everything in that entire toy store was either made of plastic, had toxic dyes in it, or was packaged in something that he didn't feel good about purchasing. So he started Bears for Humanity with that same mission of kind of shaking up an industry and providing more sustainable and, more importantly, safer alternatives for our children that we can feel good about. And when I heard that story, I really resonated with it and knew that that was someone who I wanted to work with. So it took me a long time to find the right people. And to answer your question, yes, it does cost more, but the people who really care are also willing to pay more. So in my opinion, it's justifiable, not just justifiable, but it's the move that we have to make in order to move towards a more sustainable future for our world.
Sure. Yeah, and then you go ahead.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think you're doing a fantastic job, and I wish that we had the same sort of resources to be as sustainable in how we manufacture these systems. Honestly, the biggest way that we're able to do this is we're using upcycled shipping containers. So they're usually on their first or second leg. They've traveled across the Atlantic in a lot of cases, and that's where we're building out our systems. In terms of the internal components, we are typically using mostly PVC pipes and some basic electrical and plumbing. And that's really what's powering a lot of our systems. So we are conscious on, especially the container side, how we can be sustainable, but really what we're trying to do is return nutrients that would otherwise be lost in the landfilling process back into the soil.
Great. And then you get a product on the other side of it too, right? Which
Yeah.
I think you mentioned earlier, but can you explain what it is?
Yeah. So I wish I had the prop too. So we produce two byproducts. One is biogas that we're scrubbing internally in our system, the methane from that, and then the methane is what powers the system ultimately. The other byproduct is soil sauce, which is an OMRI certified organic fertilizer. What's really exciting about this product is it is the world's first OMRI certified carbon negative liquid plant fertilizer. So we do have that in a bunch of retailers around Boston. So if you're looking for any houseplants or looking to grow your houseplants, that's always a good place to find it.
Gotcha. At this time, I feel like, we're in a unique political moment, obviously nationally. And, there's been lots of attacks on ESG, for example. How do you ensure that the brand that you're creating, the products you're creating, appeal to a wide customer base? And how do you, make that case to people that now really is a good time to invest in sustainable business practices? And I'd really like to hear from you on this, Elliot.
Yeah, I think especially with the current administration, it is around the bottom line, and it's no longer, or the way that we're looking at this in the environment is we have to make sure that we're helping businesses, improve their cash flow and get better return on investment. So something that we've been really focused on is looking at what their current costs are with waste hauling, and then seeing if we can be comparable to it and add back value on the marketing side. Our shipping containers are painted by local artists, which have a beautiful sort of vision of waste to energy to fertilizer that's then increasing plant growth and restoring those nutrients like I mentioned. But yeah, it is definitely an area that we're still navigating and determining the best course for, because it is definitely a challenge.
Are you hearing from customers that they're still pursuing their ESG goals at this point?
Yeah, so I think that it's positive to see. I think, when there's a lot of headwinds coming at us, we notice who is, staying the course and focusing on that North Star. So we've seen, especially here in Massachusetts, in a lot of the Northeast, many businesses and organizations are still very focused on ESG, being sustainable, reducing their carbon footprint, because there was pledges made for 2030 and 2050 that are still in effect. And honestly, a lot of companies are really behind the ball on that. So we're trying to support them in the best way that we can.
Yeah, and then I know I have thought about this from the perspective of what's happening in our education systems, and I was a reporter in Texas prior to this, and I did see a lot of rhetoric at the state level talking about getting messages and teaching about climate change out of schools in some cases by Republicans there. And so, how are you thinking about that as a founder of this brand trying to reach early childhood education? I assume eventually you'd want to be in schools. So, how do you appeal to a broader base?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first off, it's important that we depoliticize the environment and understand that the environment supports all living things, including humans. And there are certain terms that I think are very politically charged, like the term climate change has become very controversial for some reason that I personally don't quite understand. But I think that what we try to teach children is that nature is something that is fun and beautiful and magical, and I don't think that that's political at all. And I think that when people have an intrinsic value of the environment and an understanding that it's something that they care about, they're going to take actions to protect it, whether it's for political reasons or just for personal reasons. And I think it's really important that although we're targeting parents and educators and we're trying to introduce our resources in schools, I also think it's really important that this movement starts with the children. And if we get them excited about our characters and our branding, not because it's making the world a better place, but because it's fun and it's enjoyable and it's empowering and it's being part of something that's important, then they're going to be the ones that are going home and asking their parents to buy them a Benji the Tree Hopper or inviting these characters into their lives by engaging with our online content, opposed to being indoctrinated with an education system that forces them to learn about ecology starting in kindergarten. That's not what it's about. It's about showing them that environmental education is not necessarily like based in STEM. Environmental education is based in humans connecting with the outdoors, and starting with showing kids that they can have fun by engaging with nature is a first step to me that doesn't feel politically charged at all.
Great. And then I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll go to audience Q&A. But a lot of times when I think of, making the climate conscious choice, making the sustainable choice, it's the more expensive choice. And so how do you think about, are you concerned that some people don't have the ability to make these choices, and what needs to change, in the respective industries that y'all work in order for there to be more equitable access to, your technology, to your education materials?
I think it requires a mindset shift. I think that the culture, at least, where I grew up, and I think for a lot of us here in America, is very much based around consumerism and this idea that more is always better, and that, the happiest child is going to be the one with the most presents underneath the Christmas tree. So I think that starting to shift away from that perspective and helping people understand that sometimes less can be more. For example, one toy that a child plays with on a regular basis that is very interactive, that has a multi-dimensional aspect that allows the kid to learn in a variety of different ways by engaging with this individual toy, is way more valuable than having 50 extra plastic toy trucks that they can play with at any given time. So I think that, at least for our business model, showing parents that longevity is really important when it comes to the toys that they buy their children,
And
not just
maybe
from a
more
sustainability,
economical.
exactly, not just from a sustainability perspective, but also from an economic perspective. If you are constantly giving your child a new cheap toys, then they're going to lose interest in those toys very, very quickly, and they're going to ask for something new, and you're going to have to keep buying them these $1, $2, and $3 pieces of plastic. Whereas if you buy them one toy that's super meaningful, or even, in my childhood, if you were taken on something like a hike, that's a free alternative that is an engaging thing to do with your child that they'll be interested in the entire time, that's teaching them the right values, and it's more cost effective for you to take your kid on a hike than to buy them a bunch of toys in the first place. So I think that shifting that understanding from a parent's perspective is going to be really important for us.
Yeah, I think that's 100% spot on. One of the ways that we're looking at this is around making this more equitable, is just having less barriers, but also increasing education. I think those are the sort of two key pillars, and it does. Price is always going to be a factor for everybody. So that's something that we're really focused on, is how can we be relatively lean, especially around the waste processing side, so that we can afford ourselves to a lot larger customer base, and offer them a solution that is easily adopted, based on what they're currently doing, and fit into that practice.
Okay, great. We're going to do some audience Q&A. I've got a couple here that have come in. So one person asks, as young innovators, what role did mentors play as you developed your initiatives?
I love this one. And Noah is a mentor of mine, and maybe I'm a mentor of his. I think there's an amazing ecosystem in and around Boston. At Ecotone, we have a fantastic mentor team of advisors, and then also, friends and supporters of our business, over 120 years of experience. And I think what it does, especially as young individuals who are rapidly learning how difficult sometimes the real world can be, it just accelerates our learning curve and lets us get past a lot of the barriers and sometimes even mistakes that we might fall into. So yeah, I cannot speak highly enough about mentors, and it's something that is really important, I think, in any business.
I absolutely agree. Mentors have been invaluable to me in my journey as a student, as an entrepreneur, and also just as a human being. I was fortunate to start my business while I was still an undergrad, so I had a lot of professors that naturally kind of fell into that role of kind of serving as mentors for me early on. And after I graduated, I realized that it was a lot harder to find the right people to talk to learn in certain areas or develop my expertise in ways that I wanted to grow. But something that I learned very quickly after graduating is that even if what I'm doing as an individual is novel or unique, I'm absolutely not alone in my mission, in what I'm ultimately trying to accomplish in this world. There are so many other people out there who understand how important early childhood education is to the values that people develop about the environment. There is an entire practice of nature-based early childhood education. There's over 1,000 nature-based preschools all across the country. And when I really started to tap into this ecosystem and I started attending conferences related to environmental education, and I started just sending cold outreach to people on LinkedIn that were the thought leaders in my industry, that's when I really started making connections that were super valuable to me and understanding the bigger picture of how Adori can really play into the impact that we're ultimately trying to achieve. So I think mentorship is super valuable, but what's even more valuable to me is the understanding that you aren't alone as an entrepreneur, and there are always others who you can reach out to seek guidance, to help you reach that next step, to help you navigate a problem that you haven't navigated yourself before, but someone else likely has. So I can't stress enough that it's easy to feel alone as an entrepreneur, but there are always opportunities to find others to guide you.
Great. And another person asks, in a world with high tariffs, is there an opportunity for climate startups? That's a very interesting question. You know, how are tariffs possibly going to affect climate startups here?
Well, I think the simple answer and is the reality is that a lot of the manufacturing that occurs in the world, even from U.S. startups, come from other countries, and I think that bringing manufacturing more local and minimizing the travel distance of the products that we're consuming is ultimately something that could be more sustainable. So I definitely think there are opportunities. As an early stage startup, I can't quite afford to build a factory to start creating plush toys here in the US, but I do think eventually the goal should be to make the point where we're developing our products and the point where they're being consumed to be as close as possible. Growing up on an organic vegetable farm, this was something that my parents really cared about, was only really selling our products to people who lived in our town, because ultimately we knew that that was the most sustainable thing that we could do and the way that we could make the greatest impact. And I think that people should apply that mindset in the situation with the tariffs as well.
Yeah, I'll touch on that. I think that there's hopefully everything provides an opportunity. So I agree with you, Noah, that there could be increase of jobs, there could be opportunities that way. The way we're looking at it is there's some things that similarly early stage startups we will have to bear like increased costs on. But ultimately, we are trying to have a really localized ecosystem as well. We distribute all of our organic fertilizer product to hopefully farms like where you grew up that are organic and sustainable. And we are not trying to send that across the ocean because there is plenty of need for right here in the U.S. And that's actually something that we just received a USDA grant for localized fertilizer production, which is really exciting.
Great.
Thank you.
And then I'm going to ask one more of these audience questions, but we just have a couple minutes left, and so then we'll wrap after that. So did you all face any skepticism due to your age when launching your initiatives?
Absolutely. I once went into a school and I met one of the parents who was dropping off her student, and I was about to lead like an Adori enrichment session, and she asked who I was, and I explained that I was like a guest teacher for the day, and the first words that were out of her mouth were, "Oh, how old are you?" And it definitely gave me a little bit of self-doubt when I kind of was hearing from other people like, oh, am I too young to be doing this? But it also kind of further justifies my urgency to create positive change in the world, because if people have these hesitations about people that are too young, there's a reason. And it's because not enough young people are doing these types of things in the world, which is why it's something that people aren't used to seeing. But we need more young people taking this action to normalize it, because at the end of the day, the climate crisis is going to affect our youth the most out of anybody. And that's why it's the most important that we have more representation from people like us in the climate space to create that action, because then we're taking into account the voices of those who are going to be most impacted by it in the future. So it's definitely something that's challenging, but at the same time, it's also something that's invigorating and motivating, because it tells me that what I'm doing is important, because someone has to be the trailblazer in order to open up those pathways for other people to create impact and to start social ventures that ultimately change the world.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, but I've also faced skepticism. I'm lucky maybe in this regard that I'm 26, but people think I'm 30, so that helps a little bit, I guess. But no, ultimately, I think that there's the new perspective, and like, I think in what we maybe lack in experience and, just what we've seen, we make up for in creativity, in passion, in purpose, hopefully. So I do think that, like anything, it's an opportunity, and we can use that to our advantage. I was just listening to a podcast earlier today, and the company Moleskine, the Italian like bookmaker or notebooks, they have a board of directors that's pretty much all Gen Z. They're a multi-million-dollar company. They do very well for themselves, and they're in an industry that is technically fading because everybody's on their screens. But
I don't know. I use those notebooks every day.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I think there's been a movement back towards them. But I think that was like a really good testament and a good contextual example of the opportunity that hopefully young innovators have, and I'm proud to be a green game changer.
Okay, great. Well, with that, thank you both so much for being on this panel. That was great. And thank you, audience, for being here. Really appreciate it.